Somewhere in the wall of a hollow tree, right now, there is a meeting happening. No boardroom, no agenda, no elected representative. Just 50,000 insects, with a brain the size of a sesame seed each, solving one of the hardest decision problems in collective intelligence: where to live. A honeybee colony that has just outgrown its hive will swarm the old queen, and roughly half the colony will leave together and land in a temporary cluster on a branch. And there they will hang, vibrating, for hours or sometimes days. And during that time, hundreds of scout bees will fan out across miles of landscape, find candidate nest sites, return, and argue, not with words, with their bodies. They will dance. The longer and more vigorous the dance, the stronger the recommendation. Other scouts will watch, evaluate, and if convinced, visit the site themselves. If they agree, they'll add their own dance. If they disagree, they stop the competing dancers physically. Eventually, the swarm takes off toward a single location, one that research has shown is, with remarkable consistency, the best available option. No leader made this decision. No single bee knew enough to make it. 50,000 animals with no capacity for abstract thought just outperformed most human committees. And they do it every time. The answer to how isn't one thing. It involves quorum sensing, inhibitory signals, and an error correction mechanism so elegant that engineers are now copying it for robot swarms and distributed computing systems. Each layer is more astonishing than the last. Let's go. Start with what people assume about insect intelligence. The popular image of a beehive is of a hive mind, a collective so unified it barely counts as individuals, all operating on pure genetic programming, with the queen as some kind of CEO directing operations. Every part of this is wrong. The queen in a honeybee colony does not give orders. She does not coordinate foraging or defense or swarming decisions. She lays eggs. That is her function. The entire decision-making apparatus of a honeybee colony runs in the absence of any central authority. Thomas Seeley at Cornell University, who has spent over 4 decades studying honeybee decision-making, published his definitive account in Honeybee Democracy in 2010, synthesizing decades of field experiments and observation. His core finding: honeybee swarm intelligence operates through a process that is structurally identical to the way neurons in a brain reach a decision. Individual scouts act like individual neurons, each signaling a possible choice with varying intensity. The decision emerges when enough signals accumulate for one option to cross a threshold. The swarm doesn't vote by counting, it votes by resonance, and the system has built-in bias toward the correct answer. Here's where it gets strange. Scout bees are not impartial reporters, they are advocates. A scout bee that has found a candidate nest site returns to the swarm and performs a waggle dance, a figure-8 movement whose duration and vigor directly encode the quality of the site she visited. A mediocre site gets a short, low-energy dance. An excellent site gets a long, high-energy dance lasting several minutes, repeated dozens of times. Other scouts watch, and critically, they evaluate. If a scout has visited the same site and agrees on its quality, she joins the dancing, adding her own signal. If she visited a different site and prefers it, she does something that has no obvious analog in human democracy. She headbutts the competing dancer. A short, sharp vibration signals the stop signal that interrupts and suppresses the rival dance. Apis mellifera, the western honeybee, is engaged in active debate suppression of weak arguments. Seeley's team, tracking individually marked scouts in experiments published in Behavioral Ecology in 2003 and 2012, found that the stop signal is deployed most aggressively by scouts advocating for sites with the most competition sites, where there are multiple strong advocates. The debate gets louder around the best options. The suppression gets more aggressive as the best option emerges. The colony doesn't consensus build by waiting for everyone to agree. It builds consensus by the best advocates outcompeting the weaker ones through sheer signal strength. Now, let's tackle the part that should make you uncomfortable: the quorum mechanism. Seeley's team asked a question that sounds almost philosophical. How does the swarm know when to leave? At some point, After hours or days of dancing, the scouts commit to a decision, and the entire swarm lifts off toward the chosen site, with the queen at its center. What triggers that transition? The answer is a quorum. Scouts that have visited a candidate site and found it excellent will fly back to the site repeatedly to check on it, and each time they count how many other scouts are also at that site simultaneously. When that number crosses approximately 15 to 20 individuals, a threshold the bees appear to track automatically, the scout returns to the swarm and performs a specific behavior, piping. A high-frequency vibration transmitted through her thorax directly into the mass of bees she is touching. The piping signal means prepare to fly. When enough scouts pipe, when the quorum threshold has been reached by their tracking the swarm launches, there is no vote count, no tally, no formal declaration. The decision emerges from the distributed counting of 15 scouts at a single location simultaneously. The swarm governs itself through threshold physics, not consensus deliberation. Here's something else that almost never comes up. The honeybee system makes better decisions than human groups on equivalent tasks. Seeley ran experiments comparing bee swarm decision-making to human group decision-making across matched problems, and the bees outperform people committees in 3 specific ways. First, they avoid the loudest voice problem in human groups. The person who argues most confidently tends to win regardless of whether they're right. In bee swarms, dance duration correlates directly with objective site quality because the scout spent more time at a better site and is encoding real information, not social dominance. Second, they avoid premature consensus. Human groups often converge on the first reasonable option presented. Bee swarms maintain competitive debate until a genuine quality threshold is crossed. Third, they avoid information cascades, situations where early commitments create social pressure that causes later individuals to conform regardless of their private information. The stop signal actively suppresses cascades by slowing the momentum of leading options and giving minority positions time to be evaluated. Seeley published a direct comparison in 2004, noting that bee swarms routinely select nest sites that, by objective measured criteria, are optimal or near optimal. Human planning committees with equivalent cognitive resources and information rarely do. So here's the part nobody tells you. This isn't just a nature story. Engineers at Georgia Tech, MIT, and the European Space Agency have spent the last 15 years building what they call swarm robotics, distributed systems of simple robots that make collective decisions without central control, explicitly modeled on honeybee. Quorum sensing. The DARPA-funded project Offset deployed autonomous drone swarms using bee-inspired decision algorithms for urban reconnaissance. The principle is the same. No individual unit knows enough to lead. But the aggregate of local signals, threshold counting, and competitive suppression produces system-level intelligence that exceeds any single unit's capacity. The bees solved distributed computing before computers existed. They solved consensus protocols before mathematics could describe them. And they solved the problem of how to aggregate individual information into collective wisdom without giving any individual too much power, which is, if you think about it, the foundational problem of democratic theory. Not the voting, not the counting. The question of how you ensure that the best signal wins instead of the loudest one. Somewhere right now, on a branch somewhere, 50,000 bees are hanging in a cluster, vibrating, dancing, headbutting each other, piping. They are making a decision that will determine whether their colony survives the next winter. No leader, no vote, no abstraction. Just physics and threshold and signal competing against signal until the truth emerges from the noise. They have been doing this for 80 million years, and they are right almost every time. The oldest democracy on Earth doesn't have a capital. It has a swarm, and it never elects the wrong answer.